The people in that village had one strange rule. If you hear someone calling your name from the forest at night, never answer. Years ago, a man ignored that warning. 3 days later, he came back. But the terrifying part was, his wife said that during all 3 nights he was missing, something that looked exactly like him had still been standing outside their house every night. Hidden deep within the northern mountains was a small village where nobody dared to step outside after dark. During the day, the village looked completely normal. Children played in the dirt roads. Smoke drifted from old wooden houses. People laughed beside the wells as if nothing was wrong. But when the sun disappeared, everything changed. Doors were locked. Windows were covered. And nobody ever looked toward the forest. The elders believed the forest had been there long before the village itself. No one knew exactly what lived inside it. They only knew one thing. At night, the forest sometimes called people by name. And it always used the voice of someone they once loved. Some heard their dead mother. Others heard a child crying somewhere between the trees. And everyone who answered the voice vanished. One of them was a man named Fook. On a stormy night, while walking home beside the forest, he heard his dead wife calling his name from the darkness. So he answered and walked into the trees. 3 days later, Fook returned. But something about him was horribly wrong. He stopped speaking, stopped sleeping, stopped blinking. During the day, he sat silently outside his house, staring at the forest for hours. And every night, he wandered through the village until sunrise. People became terrified of him, because anyone who looked directly into his eyes said the same thing. It no longer felt like a human being was looking back at them. Then one night, a child disappeared. A few days later, an entire family vanished. The villagers only found footprints leading deep into the forest. And from that moment on, everyone understood the truth. Something inside the forest was learning how to become human. Many years later, a young man named Min returned to the village for his grandmother's funeral. He had spent most of his life in the city. He didn't believe in ghosts. And he certainly didn't believe old village superstitions. But the moment he arrived, he noticed something deeply unsettling about the place. After 7 p.m., nobody went outside. No lights remained on. No dogs barked. It felt as though the entire village was pretending not to exist. Whenever Min asked about the forest, people avoided the question. Until finally, an old woman grabbed his arm with trembling hands and whispered, "If you hear someone calling your name at night, do not answer." That night, Min woke suddenly after hearing a voice outside his window. Min. It sounded exactly like his grandmother. Soft. Gentle. Very close. But she had died 3 days earlier. And Min's room was on the 2nd floor. Min stayed frozen in bed. Then the voice came again. Slower this time. Closer. Min. A moment later, something began scratching softly against the window. Scratch. 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 Cold fear spread through his entire body. Because nobody could possibly be standing outside a second-floor window. Then suddenly, the scratching stopped. And seconds later, he heard footsteps dragging slowly across the roof. Heavy. Uneven. As if something was crawling above the house using both hands and feet. Min forced himself to stay silent. But throughout the entire night, his grandmother's voice continued calling his name from outside the darkness. Sometimes near. Sometimes far away. As if something was circling the house, searching for him. Then just before sunrise, everything stopped. The next morning, Min discovered muddy footprints leading from the forest all the way to his bedroom window. But the strangest part was, the footprints only went toward the house. There were no footprints leading back. Min began investigating the forest. And soon, he uncovered a horrifying truth. Years earlier, a group of hunters disappeared inside those woods without a trace. After their deaths, villagers started hearing the voices of dead loved ones calling to them at night. Some heard their mothers. Others heard missing children. Some heard wives crying somewhere deep within the trees. And everyone who answered, vanished. The villagers believed something was living inside the forest. Something that did not hunt with claws or teeth. It hunted through grief. Through loneliness. Through memory. That night, Min heard his grandmother calling him again. But this time, the voice was laughing. Not like a human laugh. More like something trying to learn how humans laugh. Unable to endure it any longer, Min entered the forest alone. At first, everything looked normal. Until darkness began falling. The sound disappeared first. No insects. No wind. Nothing except his own footsteps. The deeper he walked, the stranger the forest became. The same symbols kept appearing carved into the trees. As if he had passed the same tree over and over again. Then Min heard footsteps behind him. He turned around. Nobody was there. But the ground behind him continued sinking one step at a time, as though something invisible was slowly walking closer. Then suddenly, a voice whispered beside his ear. Min. He turned sharply. And saw his grandmother standing between the trees. Smiling. But her feet were not touching the ground. The woman stood motionless in the fog. Her smile slowly stretched wider. And wider. Until the corners of her mouth looked almost torn apart. But her eyes never moved. Never blinked. They only stared directly at Min. Then she began walking toward him. No. Not walking. Her body jerked forward in broken, unnatural movements like a puppet hanging from invisible strings. The sound of cracking bones echoed through the darkness. Min. Answer me. At that moment, the entire forest exploded with hundreds of voices calling his name at once. Crying. Laughing. Whispering from every direction. Then suddenly, Everything became silent. Completely silent. Until Min realized dozens of faces were slowly appearing inside the fog around him. All of them smiling. All of them unblinking. Min escaped the forest before sunrise. The next morning, he left the village and never returned. Months passed. And eventually, life began feeling normal again. Until one night, his phone rang. It was his mother's number. Even though she was dead, Min answered with shaking hands. At first, there was only breathing. Then a familiar voice whispered softly, "Min, don't turn around." His entire body froze. Because behind him, slow wet footsteps were dragging across the floor inside his dark apartment. Heavy. Slow. Getting closer. Then another voice spoke beside his ear. This time, it was his own voice. "Finally, I found my way out of the forest." The next morning, security cameras captured Min standing motionless in the hallway for several hours. Smiling. Without blinking. And the shadow standing behind him did not look human. After that night, Min disappeared. But sometimes, very late at night, people living in that apartment building still hear someone calling their names from the dark hallway outside, using the exact voice of the person they loved most. Some forests are not terrifying because of monsters. They are terrifying because they know exactly what makes people weak. Grief, loneliness, and the desperate desire to hear the voice of someone we loved one more time. Because sometimes, the most dangerous thing in the darkness is not the voice calling your name. It's how badly you want to answer it.